that you are well, and also hope that you are having a good day so far. Today we'll be doing our grade 5 English lesson on sentences, fragments, and run-ons. And before we start with our lesson on sentences, fragments, and run-ons, we're going to log into aplusstudents.ca. Once you've logged on to aplusstudents.ca with our username as well as our password, and then we're going to select the subject of language arts, grade 5. And once you have selected the subject of language arts, grade 5, then you're going to scroll down up until you get to the chapter of sentences, fragments, and run-ons. All right, so our chapter that we will be doing is sentences, fragments, and run-ons. Our lesson, our subject basically is going to be language arts, which is English. Grade 5. And our lessons that we're going to be focusing on under the chapter of sentences, fragments, and run-ons is it a complete sentence or fragment? Is it a complete sentence or a run-on? Or is it a complete sentence, fragment, or run-on? So that is basically going to be our lessons for today under our chapter of sentences, fragments, and run-ons. All right. And we are doing our tutorial lesson on aplusstudents.ca. All right. So when it comes to sentences, fragments, and run-ons, right? Specifically wanting to find out if it's a sentence or if it's a fragment, right? So a sentence is a group of words, right, that forms a complete thought. And once it completes a thought, right, then it basically means that it has both a subject and it has a verb. So once it has both subject as well as a verb within a specific sentence, then that is basically, let's say, a sentence, like a proper sentence. And it expresses a complete thought because it has a subject and as well as a verb, meaning it has either the thing or the person that we are talking about, as well as the action that the thing or the person does. So that is basically a sentence that expresses or completes a complete thought. For example, right? It says, my friends walk along the path. So my friends walk along the path. And if we try to identify, let's say, the subject as well as the verb within that specific sentence, right? Because we must need to identify if it's a complete sentence. Then my friends, this is the subject, and walk is our verb, right? So my friends is the subject and walking is our verb. So basically, my friend is the person that does the action, and the action that my friend does is walks. So that basically shows a complete thought within the sentence because it has both subject as well as a verb. And then a sentence fragment, right, is a group of words. It's a group of words that does not express a complete thought. So remember, a sentence is a group of words that expresses a complete thought, but a fragment or sentence fragment does not express a complete thought. And the reason why it does not express a complete thought, because it is either missing a subject or it's missing a verb. Meaning within that subject, within the sentence, there's either no subject that they're talking about or there's no action that they're showing within that sentence. So there's either no verb or there's no subject. One of that two. For example, knows the answer. Knows the answer. And if we look at this sentence, yet only says knows the answer. So now our question basically is who knows the answer? Which means that it is missing a subject. So there's a verb, right? But there's no subject. It's not telling us that Jack knows the answer, or Sarah knows the answer, or the boys know the answer, or the grade fives or sixes knows the answers, right? It just says knows the answer, but it doesn't say who knows the answer, which means that the subject is missing. And since the subject is missing, this is a sentence fragment and it does not express a complete thought since the subject is missing. So we need to basically ask ourselves who knows the answer? They must either say she knows the answer, he knows the answer, or they must either give a specific person's name or people's names. But you cannot just, for example, say knows the answer. Because now it clearly means that the subject is missing because the question is who knows the answer. If we look at our next sentence, right? Another example of a fragment. The bright red car. So the bright red car. So basically, bright red car or the bright red car, this is a subject, right? So bright red is basically just an adjective describing what type of car, but this is a subject. And now it basically leaves us to ask the question, what about the bright red car? Or you can ask yourself, what did the bright red car do? Because remember, an action is, or let's say the verb is basically an action. So you need to basically either identify what somebody did or do or does, right? So in this case, we need to ask ourselves, what did the bright red car do? Because it's not telling us. All it shows within that sentence is the subject, no verb at all, which means that this is also a fragment, right? Or sentence fragment that does not express a complete thought and it is missing a verb, right? Because you either need to say what the bright red car did. Maybe you can say the bright red car stop, right? But we can't just say the bright red car. We need to say what this bright red car did. All right. So that is basically what sentences and fragments. And then if we also look at run-ons, right? If we look at what a run-on is within a sentence, it says a sentence is a group of words that forms a complete thought, which we mentioned, right? And we said in order for it to express a complete thought, then it needs to have both subject as well as a verb, right? That is a sentence, complete thought, it's a full sentence. But as soon as it becomes a run on sentence, right? Then a run on sentence is made up of two sentences that are joined without end punctuation, or it's joined with just a comma. So there's either no end point or it is basically joined with just a comma. For example, I knocked on the door, it opened. So if we look at this specific, let's say, run on sentence, right, then we can basically separate this by saying, I knocked on the door, and it can be separated by it opened. So that is basically the two sentences. All right. Because here it says I, which is already a subject on its own. Okay, let me remove that so we can see. So basically, the word I'm going to write it over here. The word I is our subject, and knocked is our verb. And then if we look at the blue, right? that's underlined. It is our subject, and opened is our verb, right? So which means that this is two sentences that does not have an endpoint. And we're going to find out how we can basically write these sentences in order to avoid run-on sentences, or how we can fix a run-on sentence. So this one has no endpoint. It's just like running on the two sentences that is joined. And then if we look at the next one, it started raining and we ran inside. So basically, it started raining is our subject and verb. And then we ran inside is basically our subject. We ran is our verb, right? So this is also two sentences. And over here, this sentences is joined by a comma. And in order for us to fix these run-on sentences, right, then it means that we're going to have to separate these sentences into two, just like I did by separating it via, like you see with the colors. I separated according to I knocked on the door, underlined with red. It opened, underlined with blue, for example. So if we separate these two, right, and then we're going to say, I knocked on the door, then you're going to say period, right? And then capital letter I for it, opened, period. That is how you basically fix a run-on sentence. You basically add the in punctuation after the first sentence. There we have it. And then we add the capitalized letter within the second sentence to show that a new sentence is starting. And then our endpoint at the end. And in the same with this way, it says, it started raining, we ran inside, which means that it started raining, period. And then the next one is we ran inside, period. Which means that there we started with a capital letter, we ended with a period or an end point. And then the next sentence we started with a capital letter and we ended with an end point. So that is basically how you fix a run-on sentence, right? It's by separating the two sentences and then adding the end punctuation after the first sentence. And then we capitalize the start of the second sentence. And then, of course, at the end, you also you add your end point. And one more way, right? A last more way in which you can also fix a run-on sentence. Because remember, we said a run-on sentence is basically two sentences, right? that basically either has no endpoint or it is basically just separated by a comma or joined by a comma. But if you also want to fix it on a sentence, then you can rewrite it as a compound sentence. And a compound sentence is two sentences that is joined by a comma as well as a coordinating conjunction. And a coordinating conjunction is words such as and, but, or so. For example, I knocked on the door. There we have a comma, and it opened. It started raining, comma, so we ran inside. So there we have our coordinating conjunctions, which is and as well as so, which basically is joined by that conjunctions to make it a complete sentence. Right? So that is it basically on a fragment, a sentence, as well as a run-on. So now we're going to aplusstudents.ca. And we're going to the first lesson that says, is it a complete sentence or a fragment? And we said a sentence is a group of words that forms a complete thought. It has both subject as well as a verb. And a fragment, it does not express a complete thought. It's either missing a verb or it is missing a subject. All right, so now we're going to look at the sentence, right? It says, which is a sentence fragment, right? Where it does not express a complete thought. So we need to choose either between, do we either say Luke will marry Ariel on Sunday, or a fragment is knows the alphabet and some words. And remember we said that a sentence fragment, it does not express a complete thought, and it's either missing a subject or it's missing a verb. So which means if we choose between these two sentences, Luke will marry Ariel on Sunday, or knows the alphabet and some numbers, then we're going to say our sentence fragment is knows the alphabet and some numbers. Because now you need to ask yourself, who knows the alphabet and some numbers, which means that it is missing a subject. So over here, it is missing a subject. So which means that it is a sentence fragment. Which is a sentence fragment, right? We're going to have to choose between the sentences either of they sail under the bridge or lives in an earthquake zone. So they sail under the bridge or lives in an earthquake zone. We need to choose the sentence fragment. And remember, we said a sentence fragment does not express a complete thought, and it's either missing a subject or it's missing a verb. All right. And if we choose the sentence fragment, right, that does not express a complete thought, and it's either missing a subject or a verb, and then we're going to say lives in an earthquake zone. So which means that we need to ask ourselves who lives in an earthquake zone. So which means that this is then missing a subject. All right, so now we're going to say is it a complete sentence or fragment while we begin our test. So you're going to have to say which is a sentence fragment, right? And remember we said that a sentence fragment, it does not express a complete thought. It's either missing a subject or it's missing a verb. So, for example, they sail under the bridge, or we need to choose the pioneers in the wagons. So, they sail under the bridge, or the pioneers in the wagons. We need to choose the sentence fragment that does not express a complete thought, either missing a verb or it's missing a subject. And if we say which one is a sentence fragment, we're going to say the pioneers in the wagons. If we say the first one, right, then if we look at the first one says they, which is a subject, and sail is a verb, right, which means that a fragment is the second one, which is the pioneers in the wagon. So the second one is correct. So well done. The second one is correct, right? Because remember, if you want to see if it's a fragment, then try to see which one is missing, either the subject or the verb, right? You need to see which one is missing. Or if it's a complete sentence, then we need to see if it has both subject as well as a verb. So for example, it's not for example, the test. So we need to say which one is a complete sentence. And remember, a complete sentence has both subject as well as a verb, right? It says, Tucker will marry Anne on Sunday. Or do we say the inventor of the electrical or electric car? So Tucker will marry Anne on Sunday, or the inventor of the electric car. So is it option one or is it option two, a complete sentence with both subject as well as a verb? All right. So if we must say which one is a complete sentence, right, between these two sentences, and then we will say it's the first option, which is Tucker will marry Anne on Sunday, which means that Tucker is our subject and marry is our verb. So the first option is correct. So well done, guys. And which is a sentence fragment, right? A fragment does not express a complete thought. Is it Kathy's favorite doll has red hair or a city by the river? Which one is a sentence fragment? It does not express a complete thought. So we need to say if it's option one, which is Kathy's favorite doll has red hair, or option two, which is a city by the river. A sentence fragment. All right, so if we choose the correct sentence, remember we said a fragment, right? Or sentence fragment, it does not express a complete thought, right? Which means that it's either missing a subject or it is missing a verb. And if we look at the first option, right, then Kathy is a subject, right? So basically, Kathy's favorite doll has red hair is a sentence. Then we can say a city by the river is then our fragment. So the second option is correct. So well done to those who chose the second option. Now we need to say which one is again a sentence fragment, right? Which does not express a complete thought and it's either missing a subject or it is missing a verb. The first one says, Irma speaks four languages. And the second option says communicates well with everyone. So we need to say which one is a sentence fragment. It's the first option, which is Irma speaks four languages, or the second one that says communicates well with everyone. And if we choose the sentence fragment, and then we're going to say it is the second option. Because the first one it has a complete sentence. There we have Irma, which is a name of a person, subject. Speaks is the action, which is a verb, which means that the first one is a complete sentence, whereas the second one, it is missing a subject. So the second one is correct. So well done. Yes, the second one doesn't say who, it only says what is being done. So well done. So now we need to say, is it a complete sentence or if it's a run on? And remember, we said a sentence is a group of words that forms a complete thought. And a sentence has both subject as well as a verb. All right, so when it comes to run-on sentences, right, we said that a run-on sentence is made up of two sentences that are either joined by an end punctuation or just a comma. And in order for us to fix a run-on sentence, it means that we need to separate it into two sentences, add the end punctuation after the first sentence, and then capitalize the second sentence, which means at the start of the sentence we capitalize, and then at the end we add our end point. Or when it comes to a run on sentence, right, we can either fix a run on sentence by either rewriting it as a compound sentence. And a compound sentence is two sentences that is joined by a comma and a conjunction such as and, but, or so. All right, let's go to our test. So we're going to try and see which one is a run-on sentence, right? Remember, it's two sentences that is joined as one. So, which is a run-on sentence? Is it the distance between those two cities is 76 miles? Or their voyage began in Spain, it ended in Mexico? So we need to say which one is a run-on sentence. Is it the first one, which is the distance between those two cities is 76 miles? Or the second option, which is their voyage began in Spain, it ended in Mexico. And if we want to say which one is a run on sentence, we will say the second option is a run on sentence because it's basically two sentences that is joined by no end punctuation. And the second one is correct. So well done. It does not have any punctuation, correct. Which is a run on sentence? So we need to say which one is a run-on sentence. Is it the tired child lies down, it's nap time, or my family moved here 2 years ago? The first one or the second one? And if we choose the run-on sentence, we will choose the first option. The tired child lies down, it's nap time, which means that there is no in punctuation, right? And the first one is correct. All right. So we need to say which one is a complete sentence, meaning a complete sentence expresses a complete thought, which means that it has both subject as well as a verb. So is it the first one, which is tomorrow we will shop, we will buy groceries? Or is it representatives from four countries talked about the treaty? All right, so when we say or when we choose the one that is a complete sentence, right? A complete sentence, then we will say it's the second option. Because remember, the complete sentence has a subject as well as a verb, whereas a run on sentence, it's either two sentences that is joined by no in punctuation. And if we choose the complete sentence, we will choose the second option. And yes, the second one is correct because the second one has both subject as well as a verb. So we need to say which one is a run on sentence, a run on sentence. The joke was funny. The children liked it. Or the woman trims Mary's long black hair. So we need to say which one is a run on sentence. Either the joke was funny, the children liked it, or the woman trims Mary's long black hair. And if we choose the correct one, we will say it is the first option, right? And the first one is correct. It has a punctuation, it has a comma, right? But remember, it is separated by a comma only. Remember, if it only has a comma, right, then we should rather add a conjunction, a comma and a conjunction to show a complete sentence. But a run-on is two sentences that should be on its own, that is just joined by a comma or no end punctuation. And there is a comma, yes, but like I say, there's a comma that separates the two sentences, but only. Whereas if we then separate two sentences with a comma, then we should rather add a conjunction, which is and, but, or so. All right, so that is now the end of our lesson on sentences, fragments, and run-ons. And we said a sentence expresses a complete thought and it has a subject as well as a verb. Then we have a fragment which does not express a complete thought. All right. So this is the end of our lesson on sentences, fragments, and run-ons. Thank you very much, grade fives, for joining the class, and I really hope you're going to have a good day further. Goodbye.